Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today, Abel, is a widower, an author, a life coach, a dating coach. He has some really good information to share. I connected with him, saw his information on YouTube, and said, you know what? The Widowhood could appreciate his having a conversation with Abel. His books are listed on our website under resources, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Abel. Has a lot to share with us, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and we'll get right into the discussion.
Thanks, Tina. As Tina said, my name is Abel Keogh, and I am a remarried widower. I was widowed about 21 years ago. My late wife took her own life, and now I work as a relationship coach, primarily with widowers and the women who are dating them. I've written some books. I've written a couple memoirs about my experience, one with my now wife, my living wife, and some other books on relationship guides with dating, and especially with dating a widower. And I guess my specialty, I guess you could say, is just kind of creating that chapter 2 after loss.
Thank you. And there was a lot in that short introduction there. I want to go back and unpack some of that if we can. So I know you're very open about the idea that your first wife took her own life, but I am sorry for that. And I'm sure everyone that's part of this conversation, they're sorry you had to have that experience, but glad for your willingness to be able to talk about that and to share and to help other people. In that same vein, would you mind sharing a little bit about your marriage with your first wife and how it led up to that?
Yeah, so I was married to my late wife just shy of 3 years, a month shy of 3 years. We had actually known each other. We actually grew up together. We weren't, there wasn't any romantic interest until we both got to college, but we grew up together. So I actually knew her from the time we were, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years old on up, and we dated for 3 or 4 years before we got married, and married almost 3 years when she took her own life. I guess just leading up to that, for the most part, our marriage, it was a good marriage. I guess as good as marriages can be. I did at the time. I didn't have anything to compare it to, but things started to change when she got pregnant. Her mental health really deteriorated, and then she ended up taking her own life when she was 7 months pregnant. So, just around the circumstances of that, they were able to actually save the baby. I had to take the baby off life support 9 days later, unfortunately. In some ways, that was even harder than losing a spouse. But I had to take the baby off life support, and that kind of, kicked me out into the whole widowhood thing. But yeah, as far as the marriage went, it was, just until those mental health issues kind of hit. It was a good marriage, and we were young. So I guess, so people know I was 26 when I was widowed. So really young. And I guess that kind of put me in an odd spot as well, in the sense that, I had friends that weren't even married, and here's a 26-year-old widower, and I don't think anyone knew how to handle me. Friends, family, everybody. It was like, they were all obviously sad and sorry for my loss, and there was support in that area, but I just think, when I started dating again, or just how to handle somebody who was 26 and widowed, no one quite knew what to do with me. And it was, I think it was by far, I think it was the first time in my life that I truly felt alone, just in the sense, not that there wasn't some support there, but just in the sense that there wasn't any other people in their 20s I could go talk to and say, hey, how did you get through the death of your spouse? That just doesn't happen in your 20s. And so I just kind of really felt alone in a lot of the issues that I was going through, grief, and then dating again, and trying to mix those emotions or trying to figure out where, how to handle all this stuff. I was truly alone. And I'll also add, this was the early days of the internet. This was 2001. So, now, I talked about all these resources, that I have, and, Tina, you're providing resources, and there's other resources out there. But back then there was nothing, especially for young people. There was just no resources out there. So that's part of the reason I ended up doing what I was doing, is that, more than anything, I wanted somebody to talk to and someone to explain, hey, here's some ideas on maybe, this is how other people have handled it, or this is how I got through it, or this is, here are some things that, that you might want to think about. And and in some ways, I guess there's still not a lot of resources out there. I get clients all the time. I do a lot of relationship coaching, and I get clients all the time say it's hard to find stuff about dating widowed people. There are more resources out there for widows and widowers, but resources for people dating them are still very rare and hard to come by.
You said a mouthful there for sure. How did you come from the idea of losing your wife, losing your child, and just functioning? What did that road look like before you made it to a point that you were sharing your journey and helping other people?
I guess the best way to put it is that, again, there wasn't any resources out there. Nobody I could really talk to. I know my mom had suggested a therapist, and that just didn't feel right. So actually what I ended up doing was I started blogging anonymously about my experiences. This was before blog was a word even. They had like these online diaries is what they called them. So I was, I guess you could say I was blogging anonymously about the time, about just my experiences. And I wasn't advertising the blog by any stretch of the imagination. This was just something I would do, on my breaks at work, or maybe in the evenings, I'd write something up and just say, well, this is how my day went. I mean, it was raw. I wasn't editing this. I wasn't going back and spell checking it. I was just writing it and hitting publish, and just, that was it. It was just really for myself. It wasn't for anybody else. And somehow people found out about the blog, and it just started getting popular. And so it was kind of interesting, and it wasn't getting popular like with widows or people dating them necessarily. It was just, there was people that were kind of on this online community, this early online blogging community, and it was, they were passing the blog around saying, wow, you've got to read this stuff. This is really raw. This is really, this is really straightforward. He's not censoring anything. And so it turned out to be kind of, I guess, therapy in a way, just to kind of write about my experiences. And again, I wasn't really writing this for an audience. It was just like, well, I just need to kind of get this out there. And it turned popular, but it wasn't like anything I was intentionally doing to try to get people to read this. It was just, I need my 30 minutes of writing time to kind of understand what happened, when I was grieving last night, and I just kind of, lay it out there and walk away. And then it was just getting comments, I guess. People started emailing me, and they had a little kind of an early comment section on the blog, and all of a sudden people were leaving comments, and I just thought it was weird that people would want to read my story. It's like, I'm not really writing this for anybody. And anyway, that's how I kind of made that transition, I guess.
But that idea of writing and freeing it from yourself, that still holds true today for people that are grieving or having different experiences, whether it is something that they're writing and using a tablet, paper and pen. It may not be something as public as a blog, but would you say that it still would prove helpful for someone that's dealing with grief to be able to journal that per se?
There's lots of things that help different people, but I definitely think that it is a good kind of way to kind of understand maybe better your feelings. And again, not that you're writing it for anybody but yourself, but just trying to get your feelings out there and understanding them. And I think that just that writing them or expressing them in some way, right? I mean, even if you don't like writing, you could just turn a video camera on and just talk to the camera. And again, you don't have to put it on YouTube, but you could just talk to the camera and try to get this out. So whatever you're comfortable with, I think there's some kind of, maybe you can kind of better understand what it is, at least for me, I guess I could better understand somewhat what I was going through if I could at least express it. And, again, I didn't have any, and maybe it would have been different if I, maybe had Tina to talk to, right? If you were, if I felt I had someone to talk to, but again, I didn't have anybody I felt I could express this stuff to. So I was just writing it. And, again, not intentionally putting it out there for everybody to read, but just kind of just hitting publish and just kind of thinking, okay, just getting this off my chest and just understanding my, my feelings, or even trying to describe this awful date that I had, just was, I don't know, I guess it was freeing in a sense that I felt like I had kind of dealt with it and could kind of move on to the next day.
There's a lot to be said in that. Thank you for expressing it. I think when you're early, I've found, and it could be everybody, like you said, is different tools, but I've often found that even if you have somebody, quote unquote, to talk to, like you mentioned, you had your mom, you had other people, but there's a concern whether or not they really understand what you're saying and how much you have to qualify your words or explain so they understand the parameters of what they're in, that you could be with a lot of people and still feel alone.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And especially, I that's something I hear from a lot of clients, even if they have, even if they aren't 26, even if they're in their 60s or something like that, they still, or even if they're dating a widowed person, what I hear is, I don't have anybody I could talk to about this. I have friends that will listen, but they don't understand, and they're, really what it is that they're looking is for somebody who can hopefully understand these feelings or experiences. And 20 years ago, I would have loved to be able to talk to somebody that would have just, again, maybe even just understands that, yeah, what it is that you're feeling is completely normal. This is what it's like. And I didn't have anything like that. And so again, I was turning to these early blogs and just blah blah blah, and this is my day, and hitting publish and not even reading it, just hit it, publish, and go. And
Oh, wow. Have you
yeah, so
since went back and read any of these blogs over
yeah,
time?
yeah. So the blog still exists. It is locked down. I've been deciding whether or not to open it up, but I read them. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is very raw, and it is very, it's rough, but I think there's some kind of, I don't know, authenticity to it, I guess, because a lot of times now, with YouTube and these things, there's a lot of, I think, a lot of these influencers is a lot of performance art, if that makes
Yes.
sense. To a degree, and I think what resonated with the blog, I go back and read it now, and it's interesting to see actually where I was 20 years ago, where my headspace was. I was like, wow, I've really come a long way, which is good. But I think part of what attracted people to it is just how raw and real it was. I wasn't writing this to try to look good or look cool, or hey, look what I'm going through. It was just like, I was just spitting out, I was kind of vomiting out words, and I was just, I was very frank, and I wasn't holding anything back. And I think there was just kind of that, I don't know, that realness to it that, that people just kind of, I think that's what attracted people to it. It's like, this guy's being very vulnerable and open and honest. And, again, even if they couldn't relate to it, it was just like, wow, he's, he's not censoring his feelings. It's like, he's not trying to look good or do anything. He's just, he had a bad date and he messed it up, and he's just, he's just sharing that with the world, kind of thing,
Exactly. And unfortunately, our society doesn't make it look like men open up themselves and make their emotions and their feelings vulnerable. I am a breast cancer survivor, and when I was going through breast cancer, I used a blog to share. It originally started to share my journey with friends and family because it was just too much to give everybody an update one by one. But it was very liberating to be able to just, it felt like some of it was lifted off of me to be able to just to share that and exhale that. And I was not doing any editing. I just wrote it out there and just let it go. And it was very helpful, like you said, for people to be able to understand. When I think about somebody being 26 and a widow, I think about, I'm retired Army, and think about the idea of military connection. But when you don't have that and you're just going through something so horrific, I am extremely happy and proud for you that you found your way in that process to be able to do that. So you do all of this struggling, you do the blog. Was YouTube a book? What was your first formal opportunity of taking what you've experienced and now making it available to help others?
So the blog got popular, and I kept it anonymous for several years. Even after I kind of dated and remarried, I just kind of kept it anonymous. But what was happening during this time is I'm writing, again, these raw blogs, and I can still remember it, about maybe 4 or 5 months after I started this blog, I got an email from a woman, and she says, hey, I'm dating a widower. And she had these questions for me, and I'm sitting there thinking, why are you emailing me? It's like, I don't even know what it is that I'm doing at this point, But she had found my blog, and apparently there was enough I don't know, in there that maybe she saw some of her widower's behavior in me. She saw something in there, but I can still remember reading this email that somebody sent me, and I was just like, why are you emailing me? It's like I have no clue what it is that I'm doing. And so
Right.
I just thought it was like a weird one-off thing. So I replied, I answered her question or questions she had. I don't even know what I said or what the question was. I just remember I replied and hit send and thought, well, that was weird. And then like a week later, I got a second email from somebody else. And then, and these emails started to trickle in. And then, as time went on and I kind of got my head screwed on straighter and got into a serious relationship and started dating, the emails just kept coming. And I kind of realized that people were using this blog as like, this was the resource for dating a widower. And again, I wasn't, that wasn't my intention with the blog. The whole blog was just to, express myself.
Exhale for yourself, to be able to give yourself space. Yeah.
But it was, I realized it was becoming this resource. So I think maybe a couple of years after I started it, I came out of the closet, so to speak. I stripped away the anonymity and just said, well, this is who I am. And, was kind of was kind of upfront about who I was. And the emails kept coming and people were like, well, you need to, and people kept telling me, well, you should write a book about this, and I thought, okay, great, I'll write a book. So I ended up writing a book, a memoir called Room for Two. And that starts on the day that my wife took her own life and it ends exactly 1 year after that. So it's just kind of the year of my life of being widowed. And it's just kind of, it's really about I guess, the nuts and bolts of the book is going from lost to the point where I could open my heart to somebody else. So, I did, it ends before I ended up getting remarried and stuff, but it's just kind of going through my early struggles with being alone and then kind of my crazy, awful dating experiences that I had. And then kind of finally finding somebody that I thought, well, things might work out here. That's kind of what the book is about. And so I kind of wrote that. And I guess this was maybe 5 years after I started the blog. I wrote the book and said, hey, we're good. And then people were like, well, you need to write a book about dating a widower now. And so it just kind of so all the books that I've written on this, and I've written a total of 6 books, 2 memoirs, and then 4 relationship guides on the subject. This was not my dream job. I wasn't thinking when I was widowed, well, I'm going to make a career out of this. This was not my goal. But again, this was the resource for people, and they kept, it was really, my books are based on, hey, this is a great, these are some really good ideas. You need to put them into book form so people can access them better. And so that's really what spurred a lot of these book ideas. It wasn't me going out there and writing. It was people saying, well, you've written this book. And I thought by writing a book, the emails would go away, that I wouldn't, I was like, well, here's my book. And then like the emails got just,
they increased. Right.
And so, which is fine, by the way. If people want to email me, they can go to my website and do that. I'm not discouraging that, but I just thought that I'd write these books and the emails would go away, and they didn't go away, which was fine. But they kept saying, it was kept like, well, you have a book for women dating widowers. Why don't you write one for men now? And so it just kind of, it was spurring these ideas. And so it was really just driven by my audience, just saying like, this is, there are no books, there are no resources on this. And so it was kind of filling that gap where one existed. And for the most part, at least from being told from a male point of view, is, as far as I know, I'm really the only guy out there kind of doing it.
Okay. So what about, how did you develop into the YouTubes? And I think there's a tip you give on Wednesdays that you share, or there's a tag you have for that also?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, Widower Wednesday. I guess the channel is called Dating a Widower, but my videos are Widower Wednesday videos, and I do 2 a month. Is what I do, and I think I've been doing it long enough that I have about 150, 160 videos out there, which is, I don't know. When you think about it, it's amazing there's that much you can say on the subject. But again, a lot of my videos are audience driven. Hey, this is a situation that comes up and you haven't addressed this in your videos. Can you do a video on it? And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And so, I'll do videos that way. So I kind of transitioned into videos. It was more just my life was getting so busy. I married, I remarried, I had kids, at the a full-time job. I was doing all this stuff, and videos were actually kind of my way to kind of cut back on the writing and just kind of put it out there. And again, thinking like, well, it's faster to record, just to kind of note my thoughts and do a video. And it's just, but that actually spurred other things. People were way more likely to watch videos than read blogs. And it just again, I'm not intending to do this, but it just kind of grew the audience even more to the point where it's like, I can pretty much coach and write full time now because of just, of the business that those videos drive in. But it's just hitting that, niche that just, again, people dating widowed people, there's not a lot of information out there for them. And I do address concerns that widows and widowers have as well, but it's just, I think one of the things I've noted, and this is not only true, when I was dating, but just with a lot of the clients that I have, when you start dating a widow or widower, not intentionally, but the relationship becomes about them. It becomes about the widow or the widower because you have people, you're dealing with unique issues that you don't deal with in a normal relationship, in the sense that, oh, it's the late wife's date of death and the widower is going to go to the cemetery. How do I deal with this? And he's dealing with loss, and there's all these other things that are going on, and again, I don't think it's intentional, but the relationship really kind of becomes about them. And you have people that are dating widows and widowers who feel like, well, where do I fit into this? I feel like I'm in a threesome, or I feel like I'm competing with a ghost. And so it's really trying to help both the people that are dating widows and widowers, but the widows and widowers themselves navigate this and make it so the relationship isn't just about you. It's it's about two people, and and opening your heart and doing what it takes to open your heart and be able to make room for that other person in there.
So I know you've written 6 books. When you think of those books that you've written, are there some themes or some questions that come about a lot between the videos or the books or the emails that you would say, like, these are some of the top things that people ask me on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think the top concern is just knowing if a widow or widower is ready to open their heart. How does somebody know that? Or and not only how does the person dating know that, but how can a widow or widower even know, am I really ready to date again? Am I just dating because I'm lonely, or am I dating because I actually want a relationship? I mean, people date because there's lonely. There's nothing wrong with that. But, I guess an analogy I like to use that really applies to widowers is when they, men are problem solvers for the most part. You give them a problem, they want to go solve it. So their wife dies, and there's this hole in their heart, and so they think, well, there's a problem here. There's a hole in my heart. I need to fix it. And so instead of doing a lot of the emotional or mental work they need to do to kind of open their heart, they just go out and start dating again. So, so I see the difference. Typically widows wait several years before they start dating again, and widowers can be a matter of weeks or months, and they're just out there dating again.
Weeks and months, did you just say?
Or days even, but yeah, weeks and months. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I would say it's typical from what I see with clients. The probably average wait time is 3 or 4 months, and they start dating again.
Okay, so that is a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think it's just, it has to do with how men and women process grief differently. Women tend to have a better support network. When women are talkers, and they even maybe if their friends can't relate, they at least have people they can go and talk to, right? Yes. Or they have people checking up on them. And with guys, it isn't like they can just go to their guy friends and, hey, I miss my wife. That's not a conversation you have with your guy friends. But, a lot of them, again, they've been providers, they're at work, they don't necessarily have the same kind of support network, and they go home and they hate being alone. And so it's like, man, I got to get somebody in this house here to make me feel, whole and complete again. And again, nothing wrong with dating because you want a relationship and you hate being home alone. But they haven't done the emotional work and the mental work they need to do. And so they get into so the first pretty face that comes around, they're like, hey, you're awesome. They haven't even thought about it. And they're like, let's get serious. And they're promising all kinds of things. And hey, you're, wow, I've never been so happy. And we're going to get married. And I, by the way, did this as well. I had a serious relationship, before I met Julie, who, my second wife. But it's just, you just think like, wow, there's someone here to hold and hug and someone to talk to. It's like it fills this void that you have in your life. And it's just, but you haven't done the work up here or the work down in your heart to actually be ready for a relationship. You're in it for the wrong reasons.
What is some of that work in the head and the heart that you see people go through, or you guide or help with?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is you've got to be able to say goodbye to the past. And it's not that you have to stop loving your late spouse, you're always going to love them, but you have to kind of, instead of focusing on the past and your loss, you've got to focus on the present and the future. And it's not something, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like flipping a switch, but you've got to reach a point in your life or in your heart where you can say, I had, in my case, I had a great marriage to Krista. I had 3 good years of marriage with her and all these other years growing up with her, it was great. But it's time for a different chapter in my life. And if I want a chapter with somebody else, I've got to be able to kind of put that in the past where it belongs. And it's not that I don't love her or I don't think about her from time to time, but it's like, my thoughts and my focus have to be on Juliana because she's my wife now. She's my relationship now. And she was actually the first person I dated, and good for her, that was actually pretty clear about this. She was just like, she told me after, she did not want to date a widower. And by the way, she's 23, 24 when we start dating. So this is not something she's ever thought about as well.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She's never really had a serious relationship. And there's this guy that's kind of pursuing her and he's widowed. And she's just like, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about dating a divorced guy and you're widowed and you've been married. But she was pretty open about it, the sense that, that if this was going to work, I had to make her number one in my heart. And she's like, if I have any kind of indication that you're not ready to make me number one, and she said it much nicer than this. I'm being, this is the condensed, blunt Abel version, but she basically said that if you can't make me number one in your heart, this relationship is not going anywhere. And that was actually a good thing for her to say, because it kind of, and I'll admit, I was a little kind of ticked off when she said it. I was
understandably so, but it seems like it may have been the trigger to make you really start thinking about some things you didn't consider beforehand. So good for her.
Yeah. And I think that's what you got to be when you're dating a widowed person is I always say you have to be kind but firm with them and just say, this is what I expect in a relationship and you can't settle. And, again, Julie has no guidance on this. She's never dated,
uncharted territory for sure.
Yeah, and it isn't like she can go to her parents and say, "What do I do here?" So she's in uncharted territory. But she knew from her own dating that she had certain standards that she expected, and she said, "Well, I can lose Abel, or I can, but I'm not going to sacrifice for a crummy relationship." And I think maybe she at the time she was probably hoping that I would just walk away. And then she
dug in.
Yeah. So, she's like, well, maybe if I tell him this, he'll walk away and I won't have to deal with any of this. But it was the trigger. It was kind of the kick in the butt for me where it was just like, wow, what is it that I really want here? How much do I really like Julie? Do I actually see a future with her, or am I just dating her because she's pretty and I have a hole in my heart? And so that was actually, I kind of went home a little bit ticked off at her, but I thought about it over the course of a couple of days, and I was like, yeah, she's right. That if I do really, why am I dating? And then, what she's asking was fair. It wasn't like an
absolutely
fair request, So it's like, because I kind of went back as like, well, that's what Krista, Krista was like the same thing. I want to be number one in your heart, and I gave that to her. So it was like, well, why couldn't I make Juliana number one in my heart? And so, there was bumps along the way. It wasn't a smooth transition, but Julie saw that I was making enough progress and really trying to do it, and then we ended up getting married about 9 months after we started dating. But it was bumpy, but again, she saw the progress and she saw that, it didn't happen overnight, but over the course of several months, the photos came down. I was doing other things that needed to be done to make her number one. And I think that was, finally she's like, okay, we've gone far enough that we can take this to the next level. And, you're far enough along and things worked out. But yeah, I don't think it would have worked out if she hadn't told me that, because no one had ever told me that, like before Julie, I dated somebody, I had a somewhat serious relationship. And this was with somebody that I was kind of friends with, again, no romantic interest before I was widowed. And, again, a wonderful woman, but if I had maybe not been widowed or not been married, I probably wouldn't have dated her. And so it was just, again, it was that, just feeling that loss and that loneliness kind of drove me to that relationship. But she never set any kind of standards for me. It was like, get away with murder probably. And it was like, whatever, because she was making excuses because I was widowed. Well, Abel's acting this way. But, if she had ever come to me and say, hey, why are you doing this? You're not treating me the way I deserve to be treated. I think that would have had the same kind of effect. It would have been like, well, why am I dating you? Why am I in this relationship? And I probably would have said, I'm not in it for the right reasons. But no one ever said that to me. I mean, not her, not her family, not my friends, even though my friends were like, why are you dating so soon? But, it was just, again, no guidance, no direction, nothing to really go off of. And, I'm not trying to put blame on her, because she was in her 20s too, and she had never dated a widow.
No, you makes perfect sense, because
right.
I think people are very tapping around eggshells when it starts talking to a widow or widower, that they're afraid of seeing anything at all, questioning or challenging. So I could see people making excuses, just letting somebody kind of run rampant because they feel uncomfortable talking about the awkward idea of the death of someone's spouse and how that's impacted them.
Yeah, it's that, and there's also like issues. It's like, well, how do I bring up, like, he's wearing a wedding ring, or there's pictures on the wall, and how do I bring this up in such a way without sounding like jealous, or that I hate that I'm jealous of his relationship with the late spouse, because that's really not what it's about. Most people, they understand that that the widow or widower will always love the late spouse. That's usually not the issue. It's like, well, how can I bring this up without them thinking that I want to be number one? But, how do I say this without them thinking I'm trying to erase the past, or trying to, or that I'm jealous about what they have? And so, when I coach people, I can talk them through it and give them a framework on how to approach this subject in a way, that's not offensive to the widow or widower. But I like your idea of talking of walking on eggshells. That's something clients tell me all the time. It's like, there's things I want to talk to him about, but I don't know how to bring it up. And it's like, if I do bring it up, is he going to think that, again, that I'm being jealous, that I'm being petty, that, all these things? And it's like, no, you're not being jealous and petty most of the time. It's just, it's just having that a framework to do it, and understanding that the person you're dating has never been widowed before, and this is a new experience for them too. And and if you work together, you can figure this out. But it's just kind of understanding that there's no perfect solution to this. There's a price that has to be paid, on both parties for this kind of relationship. And but by starting this conversation, you can start laying out that price of a relationship, and having people decide if they're willing to pay that price.
Okay. So you mentioned about coaching. Do you exclusively coach under relationships and tagged with the widow or widower concept, or do you coach outside of that?
I do coach outside of that. I do all kinds of relationship coaching, but most of my clients are women dating widowers. That's probably, I don't know, 70%. And then I have a good chunk of widowers that I do. And then there's couples that I do as well. But a lot of these have turned into, maybe the relationship with the widower didn't work out. And so they come back to me for other kind of coaching. It's mostly, again, that's my niche, is dating widowed people. But I do other coaching as well. Just kind of, and I guess if I'm being honest with you, most of the advice I give to someone dating a widow or widower is most of the advice applies across all kinds of relationships. I think the issue is that, people, you start dating a widow or widower, you run into experiences you haven't thought of before. And so your judgment kind of gets clouded. You're like, well, what do I do? And honestly, the solution is if he wasn't a widow or widower, how would you handle this? Right. It's just, it's kind of breaking through that a mindset that, it's understanding what your values and standards are, and holding that person that you're dating to those values or standards, regardless of their marital status. Right. It doesn't matter if they're single, divorced, or widowed. You have certain standards and behavior you expected of them, and let them decide if that's something that they want to pay to be with you.
I like the idea if they want to pay to be with you, because paying looks like the work that you have to do, or coming to the reality, maybe you're not ready to date. Maybe you don't have space to make somebody number one, or realizing I do want to be ready. So a couple of mock scenarios that you probably had reality already come to you. I am a widower and I tell you I'm ready to date, but I don't want to take off my wedding band. I don't want to remove pictures from prominent placed with throughout my home. What very generic advice or conversation how do you see that going with someone?
Well, I try to get it. Well, I guess there's two answers to that. The easy answer is, well, date a widow, and then and then a lot of these things don't become problems.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Why is that the case? So a widower dating a widow, why that? Go ahead, explain a little bit about that.
So what I've seen is that widows and widowers, just because they can relate a bit more, are a little bit more understanding,
Okay.
right? So they don't necessarily see the photos as a threat, and not that the widowers are, they put them out there as a threat. But if you've never dated a widower before, or again, whatever, you're single, you're divorced, you're dating this guy, and you go over to his house, and here's photos of his life with somebody else.
It's like, what in the world are we doing here?
Yeah, yes. but a widow would be a little more understanding. Does that make sense? Now, that doesn't mean you should, I'm not saying you should keep the pictures up or not take off your a wedding band, but widows and widowers, they tend to be a little more understanding of that, right? They understand, well, yeah, you've lost someone, and you haven't remarried or anything, so of course the pictures would be up. Of course you're wearing your a wedding band. And I mean, I guess I'd say to that too, is that I don't, people come to me sometimes, it's like, well, do you have an issue with widows and widowers getting together? And I don't, but I just caution them to say, understand the reason that you're getting together, because what you don't want is to be getting together and bonding over your loss. That seems like an odd, you want to be with someone, and build new memories and build a new life and have shared activities and, values and ideas that you can build a life on. And maybe part of that is, by the way, we both lost spouses. So maybe if I'm having a bad day or a bad moment, you're a little more understanding. But the divorce rate for widows and widowers is extremely high when they remarry. Okay. It is. I mean, it's higher than.
So you're talking about the divorce rate between a widow and a widower getting married?
Well, just widows and widowers in general.
Okay.
If they get remarried, second marriages always have higher divorce rates than first marriages. But you put widows and widowers in that, and it's extremely high. And I'll get into the reasons for that in a second. But really, what it comes down to is, if you're a widow or a widower and you're dating a widow or a widower, just make sure that you're actually, you're not dating over shared loss, and you're not becoming each other's therapist. That's what you don't want.
Yes.
But I know lots of widows and widowers who have remarried, and maybe they each have a photo up of them and their late spouse, and they're cool with it, right? And which is fine. But I always just counsel them to say, just make sure that as you're building this relationship, it's not about your loss. It's about starting a new chapter and having whatever similar values, activities, interests, and things. Because no one wants to feel like a third wheel in any kind of relationship. Now I'm trying to think of where we were going with this, but
you said there were two answers. One, just go ahead and date a widow. For the widower. So the question was about, if you had a widower that came to you, they're adamant that they're ready to start dating, but they don't want to remove their wedding band or prominent pictures in the house. The A answer was date a widow. Now you think you're going to go to B. See, I'm listening.
but still, even if you date a widow, again, at some point, I think the ring has to come off. Some pictures have to come down, kind of thing. My thing to them would be is again, try to see it from the other person's point of view. You're going to them saying, "Hey, I'm ready to date and start a relationship," but you're wearing a wedding band, right? It's like that may not be a big deal to you, but it's a huge deal to somebody who hasn't been widowed. And you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes and say, how are they supposed to feel? Maybe, again, you're out at a restaurant and he's wearing a wedding band and you're not. What does it look like? You know what I mean?
I'm the side piece. That's what it looks like. It looks like
And so,
I'm not up front.
And so if they're adamant that they're not going to do that, I would just say, well, you should take some time and think about it. I'm not, if you take just take the ring off for the date. You can go back home and put it back on. But it's like, when you're out in public with somebody and you're telling them that you're ready to do it, I always say actions speak louder than words. That's what, that's something I tell all the time in my coaching sessions. I mean, I can I can tell people all the time that I love them. And it's just like with my first serious relationship, I told her that I loved her. I hinted at marriage. I didn't say I wanted to marry, but I kind of hinted that, hey, we're going to get married. But my actions did not back that up by any stretch. And so I always just say, you can keep it on, but what are your actions saying to people? Because, if they're going to come to me, I'm going to tell them, it doesn't matter what he says. It says, what is he doing? And I don't think you should be in a relationship with someone, who is wearing a wedding band if that's unacceptable behavior to you.
Okay, so it is about what that other person considers acceptable and what they're willing to do. In the conversations you've had with people, have they explained the significance of the difficulty of taking off that wedding band or taking down the pictures or express that?
Yeah, and I get it. It's hard. I mean, I can, I talk about just taking it off for the date. That's what I did for my first date. I wore it up to the time I knocked on her door and shoved it in my pocket. And, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was smart enough to realize showing up with a wedding band is probably not a good, and she knew I was widowed, but I was like, I probably shouldn't have this on. So I shoved it in my pocket right as I'm walking up to her door. And I think I put it back on as soon as the date was over. But yeah, no, I get it. It's hard, and it's okay if it's hard, but creating a chapter 2 takes work. It's not just going to happen. And again, I'm going back to that thing I said earlier, that there's a price you have to pay for a new life. If you want a new life and you want a new relationship, you've got to pay a price for that. And if you aren't willing to take down the photos or take off your wedding band, that's fine, but good luck finding a chapter 2 that will actually tolerate that. And because people may tolerate it for a while. I guess what I've seen is, again, people, most people don't think about dating a widow or widower. So he's wearing his wedding band. What do I do? Well, he's widowed, and they're kind of going through this mind thought thing, and they might put up with it for a while, but eventually it's going to happen. Is what I've seen is like, this is bothering me. How do I bring it up? And we're going back to that conversation, right? So you may find somebody for a couple dates or maybe even a few months that will tolerate some stuff, but eventually they're going to stop and ask themselves, why am I putting up with this behavior, and how can I talk to this person about it?
And the idea of communication, talking, and you mentioned this earlier, that the items that you're sharing with these people in the relationship, that they run across with all types of relationships. So if there's not a good foundation of communication, if you can't talk about these items, what more do you really have to build a marriage or a relationship on?
Yeah, exactly. Because eventually what's going to happen is that, let's just say, you work, that you communicate and work through these widower issues and whatever, get remarried and live happily ever after. These widower issues or these widow issues are going to go away eventually. And, and then you're going to have to deal with regular issues like, finances and, kids and, all kinds, jobs and all kinds of stress. I like what you said, because if you can't talk about the wedding ring on the finger, are you really going to be able to talk about financial, difficulties down the road, or, all these other things that, that are going to come up. So being able to communicate about these things builds on communicating about bigger issues. Because again, once you're ready to open your heart, these issues that my clients are dealing with go away. And not that they go away 100%, but you maybe deal with something once a year instead of every day. And so it's really just learning how to talk to each other and doing it in a way that you can say, look, I love you, and this is why we're having the conversation, and hopefully having an honest conversation with them so they can stop and think about what it is that they're doing, and hopefully, have that trigger moment like I had and say, oh, you're right. Maybe I should, maybe I need to think about this a bit more.
So if I heard you correctly, thank you for that. You do coaching for widowers trying to date, and you do coaching for women that are dating widowers. Do you coach widows also in that dating and reading? Okay. How does that look different from what coaching the widowers and the widows into the dating arena?
Widows tend to have their act together a lot more.
Go ladies!
Well, again, they've typically done a lot of the, I have widowers, and I guess let me preface this by saying no widowed person is 100% ready to date when they start dating again. It doesn't matter how much.
Fair.
it doesn't, I mean, some are more prepared than others. I've had some that have done a lot of work and it's a much easier transition, but still it's like going to school. You can go to school and study something, but then you get thrown into the real world and yeah, you've learned this stuff, but actually doing something, actually,
Oh, yeah, theory to reality. Yes.
yeah. Yeah. So you can have this thing where it's like, well, I've worked through my grief. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm on a date and I feel like I'm cheating on my spouse. It's like, the actual reality of it is a little bit different than doing it. But for the most part, widows, they tend to have their act together a bit more. So again, not that they're 100% ready, but, most of, the widowers want to know if they're ready to date again. That's what, they're like, well, am I ready to date again or what do I need to do? And with widows, it tends to be, well, this is the work I've done. What do I need to know when I start to, they approach it, they're like, well, I've done all this work and, and I've met this guy and it's like, well, just kind of, I don't want to make mistakes, kind of walk me through it. And so, I think they're looking to avoid mistakes where widowers are just like, give me the green light. I'm going to go do this. And
we're going.
Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, just get ready for some weird feelings because it doesn't matter how long you've waited or how much you've grieved. It's still just a different experience actually, doing it in real life. And I think if you've done some work, it's a much easier experience. You've actually done some effort, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of a gut punch. Like, I'm dating someone that's not my spouse. And it's just kind of a weird feeling. It's like, and again, I hadn't done much, if any work. So like on my first date, I was feeling guilty as heck. I was like, oh my gosh, I am cheating on my wife. And we were at this restaurant and I felt bad for my first date. I'm sure that she remembers it as one of her worst dates ever, but like, we're sitting there and I had purposely dated somebody that was like an hour from my house because I didn't want to run into anybody.
Smart, very smart. Okay.
So I was like, I'm dating someone that's an hour from my house, but still we were in this restaurant, it was crowded and somebody would walk into the corner of a restaurant. I'm like, like, do I know you? I'm just doing this. I was obviously not ready to date at that time, but I'm just paranoid that someone is going to see me because I didn't tell anybody I was dating. I didn't tell anybody I was on, this was early online dating. I'm zipping my mouth about this. I haven't told anybody. And the very last thing I want is someone to walk in that I know and like, Abel, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Like,
I can relate to that. I've done some dating in that experience, but I'm glad you mentioned about the cheating on your spouse. That is such a common feeling that people have when they first start dating. What are some ways you've addressed that with people or give them coping skills to manage that?
Well, I think the first thing is to realize that you're not doing anything wrong. Your spouse is dead and, you're not cheating. I mean, I know emotionally it feels that way, but you're really not cheating on them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, but I think, what I tell my widowed clients anyway is the best thing you can do is go on 2 or 3 casual dates with 2 or 3 different people. And because at least what I normally see is that the more you date, and again, not dating with the intent of I'm going to marry you. This is just very casual, high level dating. You're going out for coffee with someone. You're taking a walk. I don't know, whatever. You're
just having the interaction with that person that you could date and not taking it serious. Just very topical, superficial. Mm-hmm. Just it's like having an interview with a job you really don't want to get to start getting your interview skills out before you start with the job you really want. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah. No, that's a great analogy. And so what you do is you go on a couple of very casual dates, and 2 or 3 dates, and you kind of go home and just kind of see how you feel about it. You kind of do a gut check. But what normally happens is that the more you start, the more you go out, and again, with different people, casual dates, it just kind of settles in. It either goes 2 ways. One is that I'm not ready to date. The guilt is not going away, which is fine. That means you just got to, take a break for 6 months and come back to it. But with a lot of people, they kind of just get used to it and they're like, okay, I can handle this. It's not, I'm just out casually doing this. I'm just, I'm not looking to take someone home with me or put a ring on their finger. This is just trying to dip my toes in the water here. And usually, 2, 3, 4 casual dates is enough to kind of get that guilt, not to vanish, but at least to a manageable level where you can say, okay, I can do this. I'm not feeling and it will eventually go away. But I think that's the best way to do it, is just to kind of go out there and try it. And if it's not going away after, say, 3 dates, I would say, let's just put a plug on this and wait 6 months, 8 months, and revisit it. But I just think, it's really just a mental mind game, because you still love this person. So I would say, good. If you feel guilty when you first start dating, that's normal, because you love this person. But at the same time, you just got to realize, I think it goes back to opening your heart, and realizing that, that I want a chapter 2, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a chapter 2, but I've got to be able to put my feelings for my late spouse in a special place in my heart. And they're always going to be there, and I can go there once in a while and access them. But, it's opening your heart to somebody else and not focusing on the past.
That's sort of, thank you. That sort of goes back to what you said originally when you mentioned, if I have this correct, saying goodbye to the past. Mm-hmm. And opening up to your present or your future. That transition in itself is very challenging. Going back to the idea of the guilt, feeling like you're cheating on the date. I would think that people have a lot of challenges just with the concept of people saying, well, I'm moving forward, I'm forgetting about them. How do you show them the difference of, like you said, being to go back and visit them? You're not getting rid of them. You're just living the life that you have. How to example some of those conversations with people?
I think the best thing you can do is go out and make new memories with this other person. Does that make it's spending time with this person and really getting to know them, so you can really decide if they're a person that you really want to spend the rest of your life with. And again, it's not a smooth, it isn't like it just happens overnight. It's a process, but really it's I guess part of it's a mind game, but it's just, it's really focusing on this new person and their wants and their needs and trying to make that relationship. And yes, and, you're going to get triggered. I mean, I can't tell you how many, when I was first dating, there was, I could be, driving my date around somewhere, and, there's a bus stop where I remember waiting for the school bus with Krista or something like that, and there's this and there's that. So it's just, it's learning that you're going to get triggered, that you're going to have memories, but it's learning just to control them. And when they happen, enjoy them for half a second and push them to the side and just refocus. You know what I mean? And, I wish I could say, do these 3 things and it'll work, but it's really, a lot of it's just trial and error. And it's really, putting your heart into it. I will say this, is that I have never worked so hard for anything in my life than it was Julie's heart. That was, once I realized, once Julie and I had that conversation that, I'm either number one or this relationship's over kind of thing, and I decided, yes, I want her to be number one. It was a day in and day out working on it. It was getting up at 5. Again, I talk about action speaking louder than words. It was getting up at 5 a.m. to do marathon training with her. I'd never run a marathon before. I was a runner, but I wasn't up to her elite level. But it was like, knowing that it was dark when I was going to get up and we were going to start running, and she was going to leave me in the dust and I was going to at some point, catch up to her at the end of our run or something like that. But it was, but it was like, it was every day I was getting up at 5 a.m. I worked hard to open, it wasn't like I just kind of did things here and there. It was like every day I woke up and said, okay, I'm going to make Julie number one. And, it was getting up at 5 a.m. and then, pushing through any triggers that I might have. And, it was, in the end, it was like selling a house and moving and doing all these things so she would feel like number one. It was taking down photos. And I'm saying this like it was easy. It was not an easy process. There was a lot of emotion in it. I guess if you want to see a good example of it, you can read the book that Julie and I wrote together called The Wife in the Next Life. That's actually told from both of our perspectives. You can get Julie's perspective and my perspective in there. But I think that really does a good job of showing that, yes, the work that I did, but, going through my late wife's things and deciding what to keep and what to throw away, that was hard. That was taxing. Yes. Taking down, I had 4 or 5 photos of my late wife up. They didn't all come down overnight. They came down, but it was, it was a process. It was like maybe over a period of 4 or 5 weeks they came down. At first it was just getting rid of the photo in the living room. So when Julie came over, she felt comfortable there, right? And then working to my way, down the hall into the bedroom and things like that. But it was, it's a process, but, like anything in life, if you really want to value something, it's going to take work, and a lot of good things come from work. And but it's I'm not selling this as it being easy, but it's going to take work, and you've really got to decide this is what I want.
Thank you for saying that, because a lot of times, as we spoke about earlier, influencers or people trying to make things look very sleek and very easy. The idea of walking through this, one other thing you said, it's not a cookie cutter scenario. It's not a top 3 steps that this person takes and you just walk out and do this. It's going to be unique to your life and the things that you have to unpack to be able to make yourself ready. I know we've talked about a lot. Um, if I was interested in you coaching me, is that virtual, in person? How do you provide those services for people?
It's usually over Zoom. I do some phone calls. Some people aren't comfortable with Zoom, so I'll do a phone call. But I prefer Zoom. Just kind of like what we're doing, where I can see people and they can see me, and we can talk that way. But for the most part, it's virtual. I mean, I have clients all over the world. It's not, I think about every continent. Just about, I have at least one client. But I mean, that's the nice thing about technology, and this really didn't exist again when I was widowed. Is you can talk to somebody clear across the country who can relate to what you're going through or help you with what you're going through. And so, yeah, most of my sessions are Zoom and virtual.
Okay. And how would a person contact you if they were interested?
The best way, yeah, the best way is to go to my website, abelkeogh.com. That's www.abelkeogh.com. And there's a coaching link on there. And you can kind of read more details that way. And you can see what my hours are and schedule, and, see if there's a time that works for you.
Okay. Do you do public speaking also, or is it just the coaching?
I do speaking as well. So it's mostly coaching, but I have gone to some events where I've talked about my experiences and things like that. But again, it's kind of a niche market, just in the sense that, it's not, there's not a lot of information out there. And it's one of those things that you don't think you need until you actually need it.
It is a group that nobody wants to be a part of, but once you're there, you're looking for information. You spoke about early on the ability to talk with someone else, whether it's watching one of your videos on YouTube under a topic. I was watching one, and the topics you had was, I think a lady had written in about feeling like she was in competition for the widower that she was dating. And I think it was about 8 minutes, but you broke that question down and just really gave some very helpful information, because oftentimes people are not ready to speak with someone right away. They want the information, but they're apprehensive about making themselves available and vulnerable. I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
1, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? My family gives me hope.
Okay.
Just knowing, I think right now it's my family. My family's what gives me hope. I'm married to Julie. I have 7 kids.
7.
Yeah, we have 7 kids. So, but
wow.
I mean, it's, they are what keeps me going and gives me hope. And, I think it's part of that is knowing, and I think they give me hope, but at the same time, it's knowing that, things can be taken away from you in an instant. You can have a wonderful family today or a wonderful spouse today, and they can be gone tomorrow. And I think it's just taking advantage of this time that we have. Because we don't, time is an infinite resource, and we only have so much of it, and it's making the most of the time that we have.
That is a good information there. That's something to take to heart. I think after losing a loved one, the value of the time that we have becomes even more important in the reality to us. If you could talk to young Abel, what age would he be, and what advice would you give him?
Widowed Abel or before widowed Abel?
You get to pick whatever timeline you want.
Well, I think if I could go back to recently widowed Abel, right? So maybe this is probably be a few months after Krista died. And, before I start dating again, before I really get, where I'm maybe struggling with my feelings, which is like, hey, I feel like I should be dating again. What's wrong with me? Those are the feelings I had about 2 months after Krista died. I'm like, why do I have this feeling? What's wrong with me? I think if I could go back to widowed Abel, early widowed Abel, I would just tell him that everything's going to be okay. That, that you'll, I think sometimes we're faced with these situations and they seem overwhelming and big and huge, and oh my gosh, I'm never going to get through this. And honestly, most people get through it just fine. Not that it happens overnight, but I think if I could go back to widowed Abel there, I'd say it's going to be okay. Take a breath and, take it one day at a time and you'll be fine. But I think that's the advice I think I'd give my young widowed self, because I think I was just so desperate and so wanting a solution to my problems. And yeah, there was a solution, but it wasn't like do 3 things and your life is fixed. It wasn't it's not a simple solution, you know what I mean? And
it's not. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because just finding another person doesn't solve the grief journey. They become a part of it, but they can't be our solution to our life again. There has to be, as you spoke about before, that heart and that mind work to make us right, because that's such a heavy uh, price to put on somebody else to be your total fix. So that makes sense that it'll be okay.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, the only person that can heal you is yourself, right? I mean, you can have a reason, like Julie, when I decided that I was serious about Julie, she was a reason for me moving forward, right? But Julie couldn't fix me. She couldn't heal me. That was all work that I had to do. She could be the reason I was doing the work. She could be the, my muse and the inspiration for why I was doing what I was doing, but she couldn't, Julie can't take my grief away. That was something I had to work through myself. But I did it with the goal in mind that I'm going to work through this so I can have a relationship with her. She was the reason I was doing it, but she couldn't have, there's nothing she could do or say that was going to fix that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I said 2, but I have 2 more.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is looking to work with you, is that in line with being a therapist, or how does that differ, the services that you offer?
Yeah, so I'm a coach. I'm not a licensed therapist or anything like that. And so really what I'm looking to do is to, like any coach, is evaluate where you're at and what is it that you need. So like a good coach can take a player. I'll use volleyball for example. I have a daughter that plays volleyball, and a good coach can take my daughter and say, well, you're 6'1", and here's your strengths. So let's I want you to be an outside hitter, or I want you to be a middle, and kind of say, well, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses. Let's work on this to make you a better player, so to speak. So that's kind of what I do, in the sense that when I usually first meet with someone, it's like, well, let's take a look at like at yourself or at the relationship, whatever kind of the issue is, and let's figure out kind of a game plan on going forward. So it's not just me talking to you. I usually give my clients homework in the sense that here's some stuff that you've got to start working on.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm. and for some people, the homework might be, this relationship's not going anywhere. Your best option is to end it, unfortunately, but it also might be, you need to start having these conversations that we've talked about with them. And here's how you frame the conversations. And so it's coaching them through to how to have that conversation and doing things like that. So that's, so that's kind of what I do. I will say that, and I don't know who, so if you're listening to this, thank you. But I know there are therapists that refer people to me, again, not for the therapy part of it, but just that he can relate to what it is that you're going through, okay. And they've read my books and stuff. So these aren't like blind referrals. I've heard, they just say, yeah, my therapist has your books and recommended that I talk to you, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does.
Yeah, so I'm not going to necessarily walk them through grief therapy or anything, but I can say, well, if you're ready to date again, or you think you're ready to date, let's evaluate this. Let's talk about this, and then it's like, well, let's talk, maybe the game plan is let's go on 3 casual dates the next 6 weeks. And so it's, it's kind of coaching them through that and saying, yes, as part of this, you've got to take the wedding ring off before you, before you knock, even if it's right before you knock on their door or whatever, or meet them, you've got to take it off or whatever,
right.
It's just kind of coaching them through that, or even helping them understand, yeah, it's okay to feel like you're cheating on your spouse. This is normal, but let's just kind of focus on this, the next 2 hours with this person, and then you can go back to feeling guilty or something like that. So,
okay, thank you. So, as you said, walking through that grief journey is probably more suited for someone dealing with their therapist that way. When you're ready to carry out some specific actions, that's where you come into play, mm-hmm. and to be able to help and guide them through that process.
Yeah, especially like actions related to, again, starting a new chapter, whether, you're looking to, again, people, I have people that are just, they just want to start dating again. And that's as far as they can see. And that's fine. And I have people that I've talked to that said, I enjoyed being married and I want to get married again. And that's great, And so it's just understanding what it is that they're looking for. And honestly, if I can't help you, I will tell you I can't help you. And I can refer you to people that can. But again, it's really, it really is coaching around how do you open your heart? How do you show this person, maybe they're dating someone and they're, it's like the relationship's not working out. I can say, well, let's evaluate your actions. Let's evaluate what it is that you're doing. Why might this not be working out? If it's a widow or widower, or if it's someone dating a widow or widower, usually it's like, you need to have some tough conversations with this person. I will coach you through how to frame these conversations, and you can practice on me, and I'll push back and give you all kinds of,
okay.
And I'll give you all kinds of snarky answers, and I'll say, well, you don't really understand. I'll coach you through how to answer, some pushback that you might get.
Very nice. Thank you so much for this conversation. I know you listed are all your books on Amazon, I believe?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon, or again, they're all on my website. You can go to abelkeogh.com, and they're all on the front page there as well. But yes, they're all on Amazon. Most of them can be found on other websites as well, but Amazon for sure. They
are on our list of resources. If you go to our website under resources, all the books are listed there too. You can click a link and buy them right there on Amazon also. Thank you, Abel, so much. I'll leave the closing comments to you as we wrap this up.
Thanks, Tina. Just for especially those widows and widowers out there listening to this, thanks for listening. But I just want you to know that whatever your next chapter looks like, it doesn't have to include dating, but I just want you to know that you can be happy again, that there is, life after loss, and you can be happy again. And whatever you want that life to look like, just enjoy it. Enjoy your friends, enjoy your family. If you get into a relationship, give your whole heart to that and enjoy it as well. But, don't let loss define who you are. Don't let loss limit who you are. You can have another wonderful chapter to whatever that looks like, but it's a wonderful world out there, and you've got lots to give it. So don't just sit around and be sad, figure out a way to find and share your joy with other people.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tina.
Oh my gosh. Did he not deliver? Was that not a really good conversation? I know sometimes I wonder about myself getting so excited about these discussions because I know what it is leveraged on, the death of someone that we love. But being able to have someone be part of our conversation to bring hope and encouragement and healing is what widowhood is about. And Abel was able to do that with the information he shared. I am totally so sorry for the person that you have lost that has driven you to this conversation. But my desire and my hope is that you are receiving information that is inspiring you to have a life that you can enjoy, having a life that you feel like that you can wake up and be happy to be in, because the journey of grief is difficult, but it is something that you are capable of doing. And I thank you for allowing me and the widowhood to be part of your journey. Thanks for being here, and have a good day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.